The arrival of the invaders. The world had never seen anything like it. One moment, everything seemed normal. The sun rose, and life on Earth continued as usual. People woke up, went to work, and carried on with their daily routines. But then, without any warning, something changed. Something that would alter the course of human history forever. It started with a strange signal. At first, it was nothing more than a whisper, an odd blip on the radar. But the scientists and military personnel who monitored Earth's space defense systems knew better. They had seen enough unusual activity in the skies over the years to understand that this was different. They quickly realized it wasn't a satellite, nor was it any natural phenomenon. This was something deliberate, something unnatural. At first, it was dismissed as a glitch. Maybe it was just interference. But as the hours ticked by, it became clear that this was no accident. The signal grew stronger, more defined. And then, one day, it was followed by something else. An image. A large object appeared on the edge of Earth's atmosphere. It was a ship, or at least, that's what the radar suggested. A massive ship, so large it seemed almost unreal. It came from beyond the stars. The world's governments were put on high alert. The UN convened an emergency session, and militaries around the globe readied themselves. The people of Earth watched in a mixture of fear and curiosity, wondering what the strange visitors wanted. Were they friendly? Were they here to help? Or was this the beginning of the end? The silence was deafening. For days, the massive craft hovered just outside Earth's atmosphere, neither moving forward nor retreating. No one knew if they were waiting for a sign or simply studying their next move. The message, if there was one, had yet to be delivered. News outlets broadcast the event live, and the entire world was fixated on the skies. Speculation ran wild. Some people feared an invasion. Others hoped for an encounter of peaceful cooperation. Governments scrambled to decode any patterns in the signals sent by the craft, but they couldn't make sense of them. The messages were fragmented, cryptic, and incomprehensible. The aliens, it seemed, were observing Earth. They weren't here for an immediate attack, but something felt off. Why else would such a powerful fleet come so close without making their presence known? What were they waiting for? The tension in the air was thick. People began to panic. Stores sold out of food and supplies as people feared an impending conflict. Others tried to remain calm, believing that the aliens had no intention of harm. The military, however, was taking no chances. Every weapon, every missile system, every defense mechanism was on high alert. They knew the power of the craft they were facing. They knew that if it came to a fight, they might be outmatched. Days turned into weeks. The alien craft stayed in orbit, hovering motionless in the heavens. A few attempts at communication had failed. Every effort to establish peaceful contact was met with silence. Was this the beginning of an invasion? The aliens didn't speak, and their intentions remained unclear. And then, the unimaginable happened. One morning, a single short message was received by Earth's communication stations. It wasn't a signal from the craft itself, but a strange transmission from deep space. It was a voice that could not be ignored. The voice spoke in a language no human had ever heard before. It was a strange, eerie tone, neither friendly nor hostile. But the words were clear. "We have come. Earth is our next target." Panic spread like wildfire. Governments around the world immediately went into crisis mode. Military forces began to mobilize, and citizens took shelter in underground bunkers. Fear gripped the hearts of every person on Earth. The world's leaders came together in secret meetings, trying to formulate a plan. What did this message mean? Was this the first step of an invasion? Could they defend themselves against an alien force? The truth was, no one knew. No one had ever faced anything like this. The entire world stood on the brink of a new era, one that could mean the end of humanity as they knew it. As the world waited for the next move, one question remained. Why hadn't the aliens made their presence more known? Why had they stayed in orbit for so long without any further communication? Was the message just a warning, Or was it something far worse? Tensions reached a boiling point. The fear of the unknown overwhelmed everyone. The thought of a powerful alien species descending upon Earth, their intentions still unclear, left people in a constant state of dread. And then, just when things seemed darkest, Earth received another message. It was quick, brief, and once again, the voice was heard. This time, however, the words were different. We will give you a chance. One message, one response. Choose wisely. This new message was a riddle, a challenge. The aliens were offering Earth a single chance to communicate, to send a message back in return. But what did this mean? Could a single message change the course of humanity's fate? The world waited anxiously. The leaders of Earth gathered once again, this time with a renewed sense of urgency. They knew they had no choice but to respond. They had to send a message, an answer, a plea, or perhaps even a declaration of war. What message would humanity send to the invaders? Would it be one of peace or one of defiance? The decision was about to be made, and with it, the fate of Earth and its people would be sealed. As the clock ticked down to the final moment, the entire world held its breath. Every eye turned to the skies, waiting to see what would happen next. The message that Earth would send had to be perfect. It had to be strong, clear, and bold. If it was anything less, Earth's future could be in jeopardy. In the coming hours, humanity would make its choice. But in the back of everyone's mind, the question remained, was this the beginning of the end, or could Earth still find a way to turn the tables on the invaders? The fate of the planet rested on one message. The world would never be the same again. The world was on edge. For days, humanity had been consumed by the silence of space and the looming presence of the alien fleet. The message they had received, "We have come. Earth is our next target," had shaken the very core of Earth's survival instinct. People everywhere were terrified. Governments scrambled, desperate for any hint of what was to come. The military worked around the clock, preparing for what could be the greatest battle humanity would ever face. But in the midst of all this chaos, there was one key question that lingered in the air. What was the message Earth would send in response? The leaders of the world gathered in a secure location, a top-secret meeting held in the heart of a heavily guarded underground bunker. The United Nations convened with the heads of state from every nation. They were all there, faces grim and filled with concern. Every word, every decision they made in the coming hours could determine the fate of billions. The atmosphere was tense. A sense of urgency was thick in the room. With each passing second, the clock seemed to tick louder in their ears. Everyone knew this was the most important decision in human history. There could be no room for error. "We have one shot at this," President Hawkins of the United States said, his voice echoing through the cold, sterile room. "We need a message that is firm, that shows we're not afraid, but we must also make it clear that we do not seek conflict." The other world leaders nodded in agreement, but uncertainty lingered in the air. They had no experience in dealing with extraterrestrial threats. In fact, most had considered alien life nothing more than a myth, a story told in science fiction books and movies. Now, here they were, facing a reality that was far more terrifying than anything they had imagined. Some of the military advisors suggested a more aggressive approach. "We need to show them that we are prepared to defend ourselves," General Ivanov of Russia argued. "If they're coming to invade, we should make them understand we won't go down without a fight." But President Hawkins shook his head. "We don't know if they are here to attack, or if they are simply observing. We can't start a war based on assumptions." The room fell silent. There was no easy answer. Every option felt dangerous. A sudden thought crossed the minds of the leaders. Could they trust the aliens, or were they playing a game? A psychological battle to make Earth reveal its weaknesses. Maybe we don't need to fight," said Dr. Ellen Foster, a leading scientist specializing in extraterrestrial life. She stood at the front of the room, her expression thoughtful. "What if we offer them something else? What if the message we send is one of cooperation? What if we show them that we're willing to work together? The room fell into another heavy silence. No one had expected this suggestion. Cooperation, with beings who had come from beyond the stars. It was a risky idea. But Dr. Foster's words were logical. Maybe, just maybe, the aliens were looking for an opportunity to communicate. They had reached out after all. They could have attacked immediately, but they hadn't. "We don't know their true intentions," President Hawkins said, finally breaking the silence. "But I agree with Dr. Foster. We need to send a message that reflects humanity's strength, but also its desire for peace. If they're here to conquer, they'll do it no matter what we say. But if they are truly looking for a way to communicate, we need to show them we are open to dialogue." The decision was made. The world would send a message, a single, unified message of peace. The message would be strong, clear, and firm. But it would also extend an olive branch, showing that Earth was not a planet to be feared, but one that sought cooperation. The leaders of Earth worked together to craft the message. It had to be short, concise, and easy to understand, yet powerful enough to communicate humanity's resolve. The wording had to be perfect. It had to convey strength without aggression, openness without weakness. It had to capture the very essence of humanity: resilient, resourceful, and hopeful. Hours passed as they debated the final wording. Suggestions flew around the room, and each word was carefully weighed. Finally, the message was ready. "We are not your enemies. We are Earth. We seek peace, but we will defend ourselves if necessary. We offer you communication and cooperation. Will you choose to understand us?" It was sent. And then the waiting began. The world watched anxiously, waiting for a response. News networks broadcasted the event live, showing images of the alien fleet in the sky, as well as the transmission being sent from Earth. Every nation held its breath, waiting to see if their words would be heard. Hours passed, then days, but there was no response. The uncertainty was unbearable. Had the aliens heard the message? Had they understood it? Were they simply ignoring it? Or worse, were they preparing for an attack despite the peace offering? On the fourth day after the message was sent, just as hope was beginning to dwindle, the world received an answer. It was a simple transmission, but the meaning behind it was clear. "We have received your message. You will have your answers soon." It was not much, but it was enough to keep the hope alive. Earth had made contact. Now, it was a waiting game. In the days that followed, Earth's military remained on high alert. The world's leaders were ready for anything. But deep down, there was a growing sense of relief. The aliens hadn't attacked. They hadn't rejected the message outright. There was still a chance for peace. But what did the aliens mean by soon? The words were vague, leaving room for interpretation. Was this a promise of communication? Or was it a warning of something yet to come? Could Earth truly avoid the conflict that seemed inevitable only days before? The world would have to wait for the answer, but one thing was certain. Humanity's response had changed the course of events. Whether that would be enough to secure peace, or whether it was merely the beginning of a much larger story, no one could say. But humanity had taken its first step. It had sent its message to the stars. And now, only time would tell what would happen next. The days that followed the transmission were filled with tense anticipation. Earth had made its message clear. The hope for peaceful dialogue was now in the hands of the alien invaders, but their response was nowhere to be found. Each passing hour stretched the limits of human patience. News outlets, social media, and government briefings were flooded with speculation. What would happen next? Was the message received? Would it make a difference? All eyes were on the skies. The once daunting fleet of ships that hovered above Earth's atmosphere had been eerily quiet. They made no attempt to move forward, yet they didn't retreat. It was as though they were waiting, just like the humans were. But for what? In the control room of Earth's Global Defense Command, the air was thick with unease. Scientists, military officials, and world leaders sat at monitors, their eyes fixed on the screens. Every hour, new scans of the alien fleet were conducted, but there was no sign of movement. The ships remained suspended, distant, silent. The alien ships appeared like dark, ominous shadows against the backdrop of Earth's blue sky. Weeks passed with no further word. People began to wonder if the alien fleet had even truly heard the message. Maybe it was a mistake to hope for a peaceful resolution. Maybe the aliens had no interest in talking at all. The longer the silence continued, the more the fear began to build. Then, on the fourth day of complete silence, the unthinkable happened. A new transmission came through. Short, simple, yet unmistakably clear. It was not a human voice, nor was it a message from one of Earth's world leaders. Instead, the message came from the very ships in orbit. "We are here. You will learn soon. Prepare." The words struck like a hammer. The meaning behind them was unsettling, shrouded in mystery. There was no explanation, no further context, just a vague promise of something to come. Humanity's hope that they had opened the door to peaceful cooperation began to fade. Could this be the precursor to an invasion? The message carried an ominous tone, the words chosen to leave just enough room for fear to take root. World leaders scrambled for answers. What did the aliens mean by prepare? Prepare for what? For an attack? For communication? The unknown had a grip on the world now, tighter than ever before. The calm they had hoped for seemed to be slipping further away with each passing moment. Prepare. The words rang through the meeting rooms, echoing in the minds of the world's leaders. What does that mean? "I think they're preparing us for something," General Ivanov of Russia said grimly. "They may be setting us up for something far worse than we thought." A growing sense of dread filled the room. The alien fleet had not acted, but their message had undeniably dark undertones. Whatever this new development was, it was clear that the aliens were not just biding their time. They were preparing for something. But what? Was this message meant to frighten humanity into submission? Was it an invitation for further negotiations, or a veiled threat? The ambiguity of the transmission was maddening. It offered no clear answers, only more questions. "We need to be ready," President Hawkins of the United States said, his voice low but firm. "We've received their message. Now, we wait. But we do not stand idly by. The world must be prepared for anything." The decision was made to bolster Earth's defense forces even further. Every nation began scrambling to fortify its defenses. Military exercises were held around the world, with forces on high alert. Air forces took to the skies in full combat readiness, and space programs began to prepare for any eventuality, even the possibility of countering the alien fleet if things escalated. The fear was palpable. Humanity, once certain of its place in the universe, now found itself facing a threat from the stars. The very existence of the human race was on the line, and there was no clear path forward. But amidst all the fear, something unexpected occurred. On the following day, Earth's global communication systems were flooded with reports. From every corner of the world, ordinary citizens began to notice something odd. The skies, once filled with the looming shadow of the alien ships, began to shift. There was something different about them. They were no longer silent. Suddenly, the fleet moved. A slow but deliberate shift in position. The ships began to rearrange themselves, forming new formations that seemed almost deliberate. It was as if they were observing, watching, learning, or perhaps testing humanity. This sudden change did not go unnoticed. The media began broadcasting live footage of the fleet's new formation. It was a strange sight, eerie yet fascinating. The ships were now in a tighter formation, almost as if they were surrounding the planet. The human race, once confident in its safety, now faced an unknown variable that loomed above them. It was an unsettling sight, one that made the heart race, the blood run cold. What was the alien fleet doing? Why the change in position? Were they getting ready to attack? Or was this their way of signaling that the time for talking was over? The world held its breath once again. The shifting of the ships could mean anything, or perhaps it meant everything. At the same time, in the command centers of Earth's military forces, discussions were heating up. The world's leaders couldn't afford to waste any more time. This change in the fleet's position demanded an immediate response. What if this was the prelude to an invasion? What if the preparation they had warned about was about to begin? President Hawkins, who had been at the center of the diplomatic efforts, stood before a crowd of anxious military leaders and scientists. "We do not know their intent," he began, his voice unwavering despite the uncertainty in his eyes. "But what we do know is that they have shown a willingness to communicate. Our message has not been ignored. But now we must be ready for anything." He turned to his advisors. "Begin preparations for all contingencies." And so, the stage was set for the next chapter. Humanity's response to the alien threat was about to face its greatest challenge yet. The planet was on edge, and the unknown loomed larger than ever before. But one thing was certain: the alien fleet had stirred something deep within humanity, the will to survive. The days that followed the alien fleet's mysterious repositioning were filled with a heightened sense of fear and anticipation. The world was teetering on the edge of something monumental, but no one knew exactly what that something was. News outlets, once hopeful and filled with reports of peaceful talks, now broadcast warnings and speculations. Could Earth have been misinterpreting the alien fleet's movements? Was this a sign of impending war? Or could it be an invitation to something more, something that humanity wasn't prepared for? At the United Nations headquarters, a meeting was called to address the growing concern. Delegates from every nation gathered, their faces drawn with stress. The pressure was immense. The situation had escalated in a matter of days, and now there was a sense of urgency in every conversation. President Hawkins, who had been at the forefront of humanity's diplomatic efforts, stood at the head of the table. The room fell silent as his voice broke through the tension. "We don't know their plans," he began, his tone firm yet tinged with uncertainty. "But we do know this: whatever happens next will change everything. The world's survival is at stake." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Leaders from around the globe were visibly tense, their faces etched with concern. There was no way to predict the next move of the alien fleet. Would they attack? Would they negotiate? Or was there something else entirely at play? "We've made our message clear," Hawkins continued, looking around the room. "Now it's time to prepare for all possibilities. We need to show them that we're united, strong, and ready to defend our home." While President Hawkins addressed the world's leaders, the alien fleet above Earth remained silent. It was a deep silence that stretched for days, further stoking the fires of anxiety. Earth's global defense systems were on high alert, but no further transmissions came from the invaders. Were they just waiting for the right moment to strike? Or was something more complex unfolding? In the Space Control Center, engineers and scientists worked around the clock to monitor the alien fleet's movements. They had no way of predicting what the ships would do next, but every small shift, every subtle change in formation was scrutinized. Then, after nearly a week of absolute silence, a new transmission came through, one that would shatter everything. Unlike the cryptic message Earth had received earlier, this transmission was clear, concise, and startling. It was from the alien fleet, but this time, it wasn't a simple declaration. It was a challenge. "Your message has been received, but you are not prepared. You will know the truth soon." The message was short, yet chilling. It suggested that Earth's response had not been enough. It hinted that the alien fleet was aware of humanity's weaknesses and that something much bigger was coming. The words carried an unmistakable tone of superiority, and their intent was clear. The invaders were not here for peace. They were here to test humanity, to challenge Earth's resolve in ways that no one had anticipated. The transmission was broadcasted to the world, and the reaction was immediate. Panic spread like wildfire. People everywhere feared the worst. It was no longer a question of whether Earth would survive. It was now a question of how much of Earth would remain intact after the aliens' judgment. In the streets, crowds gathered, protesting, voicing their anger, and demanding action. Many citizens felt betrayed. They had hoped for peace, for a diplomatic resolution. But now, those hopes were dashed, and all that remained was uncertainty and fear. Meanwhile, back in the command center, the military leaders and scientists scrambled to make sense of the alien message. What did the invaders mean by, "You are not prepared"? What truth were they referring to? And why were the aliens so confident in their superiority? General Ivanov, a seasoned military strategist from Russia, was the first to speak. "They're not here to negotiate. They're here to dominate, to break us. We've miscalculated from the beginning." This was never about peace. A grim silence filled the room. It seemed that Earth's worst fears were about to come true. The alien fleet, with its formidable size and power, had been watching, waiting for the moment when humanity would show its true vulnerabilities. And now, it appeared that moment had arrived. In response to the new transmission, President Hawkins addressed the world once more, his voice resolute but tinged with a sense of urgency. "We have always believed that humanity's strength lies in our ability to adapt, to rise in the face of adversity. Now is the time to prove that. We will not let this invader break our spirit." But even as the president spoke, many began to question if humanity was truly prepared for the scale of the threat it was facing. The alien fleet was not just large. It was technologically advanced in ways that Earth had never before encountered. Earth's defenses had been bolstered, yes, but were they enough? Was Earth really ready to face what was coming? At the same time, a new layer of intrigue began to emerge. The aliens, for all their power, were not acting as invaders typically would. They weren't launching an all-out attack. Instead, they were observing, probing, testing humanity's defenses and resolve. It was as if they were waiting for something, waiting for humanity to take the next step, to make a move that would allow the invaders to judge their worthiness. And this, more than anything else, was the most unsettling part. The aliens were not attacking because they did not need to. They were patient. They had time. They were testing humanity to see if it could be worthy of survival. As the days wore on, the tension in the world only grew. Earth's forces prepared for battle, and the global community braced for whatever would come next. The aliens had thrown down the gauntlet, but the real question was whether humanity could rise to meet it. Would Earth be able to survive this trial, or would the invaders prove too much, breaking humanity's resolve before it could fight back? The next move was in the hands of both the alien invaders and the people of Earth, and only time would tell if humanity had the strength to face the unknown. The days following the alien fleet's chilling transmission were filled with mounting uncertainty. Earth's defenses were at the ready, but a deeper, more unsettling truth was beginning to take shape. This wasn't just an invasion. It was something much more insidious, a test of humanity's will and survival. In the heart of the United Nations Security Council building, world leaders sat in tense silence, contemplating their next move. President Hawkins, now the figurehead of Earth's resistance, stood in front of the council. The weight of the world rested on his shoulders, but he felt no burden heavier than the one placed on humanity itself. "We can't afford to wait any longer," Hawkins said firmly, his voice a mix of resolve and concern. "The aliens have made their intentions clear. They're testing us, not just our military might, but our very spirit. And if we fail, it will mean the end of everything we've built." But even as he spoke, doubt crept into the hearts of those around him. Earth had never faced an enemy like this, an enemy that wasn't immediately bent on destruction, but instead on seeing how humanity would respond to their challenge. The alien fleet hung in orbit like an ominous shadow, a silent witness to humanity's every move. The tension was palpable. Across the globe, every country braced for impact, with their defense systems ready, but no one knew when, or if, the alien invaders would make their next move. The message had been clear. Humanity wasn't prepared. But what did that mean? What was the aliens' true plan? In the war rooms and control centers, military leaders were at odds. Some advocated for immediate action, suggesting that Earth strike first before the invaders could strike. But others, led by General Ivanov, urged caution. If we rush into this blindly, we'll only prove the aliens' point. They've studied us, analyzed us. Our first move must be our smartest. While the world debated its options, something strange began to happen. In every major city, people started to report sightings, strange lights in the sky, flickering in and out of existence. Some dismissed them as mere coincidences, but others began to see a pattern. These phenomena weren't random, they were deliberate. In Tokyo, a team of scientists working at the Tsukuba Space Center discovered a troubling anomaly. The alien ships weren't just sitting in orbit, they were shifting. Not in position, but in frequency. The ships were cloaked, hiding in a way that no human technology could replicate. And it wasn't just in space, it was affecting communications, the very signals that Earth used to keep track of everything from satellites to military transmissions. It's like they're blocking us, Dr. Akira Tanaka, the lead scientist, reported to the Global Council. We can't get a clear signal. It's like they're watching us, but we can't see them. The implications were clear. The aliens had developed technology far beyond anything Earth had ever imagined. They could render themselves invisible, not just physically, but across the entire spectrum of communication. The very nature of the invasion was now in question. Was the fleet planning to attack, or were they already here, observing every move Earth made? As military forces scrambled to find a solution, the civilian world was gripped by fear and confusion. Cities around the world saw protests, people demanding to know what was happening, and whether humanity was truly prepared for what was to come. Some believed the alien fleet was waiting for humanity to show its hand, to see if the planet could rise to the occasion. Others feared that the invaders were toying with Earth, dragging the world into a game that it had no hope of winning. Then, a breakthrough came. A small team of engineers from around the world, working in secret, uncovered something unexpected. While the alien ships had been manipulating the electromagnetic spectrum, they had made one critical mistake. They had left a tiny, but detectable, signal in the chaos. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was enough for a group of dedicated engineers to piece together. The signal was coming from deep within the alien fleet, from the heart of the Armada. This could be it, said James McLaren, a communications expert who had worked on the project. This signal, it's their weakness. They've underestimated our ability to track them. The discovery was a beacon of hope. With the alien fleet hiding in plain sight, humanity now had the upper hand. They could track their movements, understand their patterns, and potentially disrupt the invaders' plans. As the news spread, it sparked a renewed sense of determination across the globe. People who had been paralyzed by fear began to believe again. If the aliens were watching, if they were truly testing humanity, then humanity's answer had to be clear. They were not ready to give up. They had survived the unimaginable before, and they would do it again. But even as Earth's defenses began to rally, there was still one question that hung over everyone's heads. What would the aliens do next? In the halls of the White House, President Hawkins gathered his most trusted advisors. The situation had escalated beyond anything he had ever imagined. "We've learned something crucial," he said, "but we can't assume we've won. The invaders are clever. They might be testing us in ways we haven't even thought of." Across the world, military forces stood on high alert, ready to respond to any provocation. But there was a growing realization that this was more than just a battle for survival. This was a test of humanity's very nature. Could Earth's people rise to the occasion, stand united in the face of the unknown, and show the invaders that they were not just survivors, they were a force to be reckoned with? The world held its breath, waiting for the next move from the alien fleet. Would they attack, or would they finally reveal their true intentions? As Earth's leaders prepared for the worst, The question of whether humanity had the courage to face the unknown still loomed large. Only time would tell if humanity could pass the ultimate test. The discovery of the alien fleet's hidden signal was the first real glimmer of hope Earth had seen since the invasion began. As global leaders and military commanders processed the information, the feeling of paralysis that had gripped the world slowly began to fade. Humanity now had a small yet vital piece of the puzzle, something that could turn the tide of the invasion. The signal was a key to understanding the invaders' true intentions, and Earth's experts were determined to find a way to exploit it. In the secure underground bunkers where Earth's brightest minds worked tirelessly, Dr. Akira Tanaka and her team analyzed the signal data around the clock. Their task was nothing short of monumental, decoding a message hidden in an alien frequency that was designed to be nearly undetectable. The more they dug into the data, the clearer it became that the invaders had underestimated Earth's technological abilities. What they saw as an invincible form of communication was, in reality, a fragile thread that could be severed with the right knowledge. It's almost like they're daring us to find it, Dr. Tanaka mused one night as she stared at the complex array of signals on her screen. But what if we're not just looking at their communications? What if it's more than that? What if it's their entire system we've just uncovered? Her words echoed through the room, and a sense of excitement replaced the unease that had permeated their every move. The team's work now had a clear goal. They weren't just decoding a message. They were learning how to disrupt the invaders' entire communication network. However, even as the team worked to unlock the alien signal's secrets, the situation on the global stage was growing more urgent. Reports of alien ships moving closer to Earth were confirmed, and the sense of dread among the public reached new heights. News broadcasts were flooded with updates, some hopeful, some despairing. The world's military forces, already on high alert, found themselves grappling with the uncertainty of what came next. President Hawkins, sitting in the Oval Office, stared at the world map on his desk. Every inch of Earth was under threat, but something in him refused to give in to fear. He understood that the fate of the planet hinged on one crucial element: humanity's response. It was no longer just about weapons or technology. It was about the resilience, resourcefulness, and unity of the human race. In his next address to the world, Hawkins delivered a powerful message to the people of Earth. We may be small compared to the vastness of the universe, but we are not powerless. We are not a species to be underestimated. We will fight, not just for survival, but to show every being out there that we are here to stay. This invasion ends when we decide it ends. The speech resonated across the globe, from the bustling streets of New York to the quiet villages of rural India. People were no longer afraid to look up at the sky. Instead, they felt a new sense of purpose. The message was clear. Earth was not going to fall quietly into the hands of an alien invader. They had a right to defend their home, and they would. In the weeks that followed, humanity worked together like never before. Scientists, engineers, and military leaders pooled their knowledge, developing countermeasures to the alien technology. The discovery of the hidden signal had given them a foothold, but they knew they needed to act fast before the invaders launched their full assault. As the global resistance took shape, a new strategy emerged. Instead of waiting for the aliens to make the first move, humanity would take the offensive. Dr. Tanaka's team had found a way to manipulate the alien signal, sending out a counter-frequency that would temporarily disable the alien cloaking technology. It was a risky move, but it was the only option left. If they succeeded, they could disable the fleet long enough to make a real impact. On the eve of the plan's implementation, President Hawkins addressed the world again. Tomorrow, we take the fight to them. We may not know everything about our invaders, but we know one thing for certain. They never expected us to fight back. That's the one thing they failed to account for. And now, we'll make them regret it. The world watched in anticipation as military bases around the globe prepared to launch their counterstrike. The hope that had been kindled by the discovery of the alien signal now burned bright in every corner of the Earth. People knew that their survival depended not on the might of their armies, but on their ability to outthink the invaders. It was a battle of wits as much as firepower. In the quiet of the command center, as the final preparations took place, General Ivanov stood at the helm. "This is it," he said. "We've done everything we can. It's time to show them what Earth is made of." Across the world, the countdown began. And then, with a collective breath held by all, the signal was sent. The counter-frequency hummed through the air, reaching the alien fleet. For a moment, nothing happened. The world waited, holding its breath. And then, a ripple of light appeared in the sky, a fleeting moment of brilliance, as the alien cloaking technology flickered and faded. The invaders had been exposed. For the first time since the alien fleet had arrived, humanity had gained the upper hand. The invaders, who had once believed themselves to be the masters of this encounter, were now vulnerable. Their once invisible ships glowed brightly against the backdrop of space, easy targets for Earth's combined forces. The world erupted in cheers. People flooded the streets, raising their voices in celebration. But the victory was far from complete. This was just the beginning. Now that the alien fleet was visible, humanity had to act fast. Every second counted. But for the first time, humanity was no longer sitting in the shadows, waiting for the invaders to make their next move. They had shown their strength, and in doing so, they had proven to the universe that Earth was not a place to be taken lightly. The turning point had arrived, and humanity was ready to make its stand. The world stood on the edge of a precipice. The alien fleet, once invisible and thought to be invincible, was now exposed, and humanity was finally in a position to strike. The tide had shifted, but the battle was far from over. The countdown had started, and the first wave of Earth's forces surged into action. President Hawkins' voice rang out once again, this time with unwavering resolve. "This is our moment. The invaders have shown their hand. Now we show them ours. We fight for Earth, for our future, and for every human who believes in the strength of our spirit." Across the globe, the preparations were complete. The combined forces of every nation, every military, every scientist who had worked tirelessly, now moved as one. The world had never seen such unity. It was a desperate gamble, but humanity had no other choice. The skies lit up as Earth's newly revealed fleet launched into space. A wave of fighter jets and advanced spacecraft, all fueled by the shared knowledge of the human race's ingenuity, streaked toward the alien armada. The tension was palpable. Every man and woman involved knew that the battle ahead would determine the fate of Earth. Dr. Akira Tanaka, standing in a secure military command center, looked at the incoming transmission. It was a message from the fleet commander. "We've initiated the counterattack, but we need your next move. The alien mothership is moving to attack our central base. We can't hold them off much longer. What's our next move?" Tanaka's eyes flicked to the screen, where the alien fleet loomed ominously. She had worked tirelessly to decipher their tactics, but now it was time to put it all to use. Her fingers flew across the holographic console, accessing the data she had painstakingly collected. The aliens might have had advanced technology, but there was one thing they lacked: a deep understanding of human unpredictability. "We can disable their shield network using the signal interference we discovered," Tanaka said, her voice steady despite the pressure. "We just need to coordinate it with our fleet's attack. The shields are their greatest strength, but they'll fall once we hit them with the right frequency." Time was running out. The alien mothership, now visible in the night sky, began to pulse with energy. Its size was immense, dwarfing anything humanity had ever seen. It was a symbol of the invaders' power, but humanity had already shown that they were no longer helpless. The signal was sent. Earth's fleets fired their weapons in unison, targeting the alien ships with pinpoint accuracy. The massive mothership, once so invulnerable, suddenly flickered and groaned as its shield network began to falter. For the first time, the invaders were vulnerable. The sky exploded in flashes of light as the first wave of missiles made contact. The alien fleet scrambled to retaliate, but the interference from Earth's newly revealed signal was too much. Their systems, once flawless, began to malfunction. The invaders, now realizing that their superiority was slipping away, attempted to regroup, but they were no longer in control. As Earth's forces closed in, the battlefield became a cacophony of chaos. The invaders fought back with desperation, but the human forces, driven by the collective will of every person on Earth, fought with a fierce determination that could not be matched. In the middle of the battle, President Hawkins addressed the world once more, his voice broadcast to every corner of Earth. "We have come together as one. This is our time to show the universe what humanity can do when we fight for our survival. We will not fall. We will not surrender. This battle is ours." On the ground, the people of Earth watched the sky light up with explosions, each one a step closer to victory. It was a battle for the future of humanity, and it was a battle they could not afford to lose. As the final blow was struck, and the alien mothership's defenses collapsed under the combined might of Earth's forces, a collective cheer arose from every corner of the globe. The alien fleet, once thought invincible, was broken. The invaders, who had come to Earth with the belief that they could crush humanity, now realized that Earth was not a place to be taken lightly. The battle was over, but the war was not just about defeating the invaders. It was about something much greater. It was about proving that humanity could rise above any challenge, that Earth would not be subdued by the power of any alien force. It was about showing the universe that no matter how small, no matter how seemingly insignificant, humanity would never back down. In the aftermath, as the alien ships limped away or were destroyed, Earth stood victorious. The cost of the battle had been high, but the triumph was undeniable. Humanity had not just survived, they had prevailed. The message was clear. Earth was not a place to be underestimated. The outer colony of Vornis 9 was on the brink of complete destruction. The once thriving world, known for its peaceful inhabitants and advanced technology, now faced annihilation. In the cold, empty expanse of space, the enemy, the Xorith Dominion, had descended without warning, and their relentless assault was unyielding. For the colony's defenders, there was no escape. The Xorith fleet had come without mercy, their massive warships raining destruction down on every defense. The first wave had obliterated the outer planetary shields, and the second wave was tearing apart the city defenses. Panic spread like wildfire among the inhabitants. The Xorith were merciless. They had come to conquer, to crush the spirits of every living thing in their path. And now Vornis 9 was a prime target. The once grand cityscapes were reduced to rubble, and the last remaining soldiers and civilians were forced to retreat underground, where they would wait for their inevitable fate. Commander Jalen Torres watched helplessly from his command center, trying to keep his people alive. Desperation weighed heavily on him. The communications channels were down, and there was no way to reach the rest of the galaxy for help. No one could hear their cries. Tears filled his eyes as he stared at the screen displaying the chaos unfolding above. He had done everything he could to hold off the Xorith, but it wasn't enough. The last of the colony's defenses had crumbled. With no other choice, he activated the emergency distress beacon, praying that somewhere, someone might hear their final call. He swallowed hard, knowing this was their last message. "This is our last stand. No one is coming. The Xorith are unstoppable." The message echoed through the empty vastness of space, sending a final plea for help into the void. As Torres cut the transmission, the overwhelming silence that followed only deepened his sense of doom. Above, the Xorith fleet rained fire down on the colony, their laughter transmitting through the airwaves. They had no fear of this insignificant world. The Xorith had destroyed countless colonies before, and Vornis 9 would be no different. To them, humanity was a fleeting memory, nothing more than an afterthought. With the last city's defenses in ruins, the survivors huddled in their underground shelters, knowing that it was only a matter of time before the enemy came for them. But just as the darkness seemed ready to swallow everything, something strange happened. Suddenly, the Xoreth stopped. Their ships froze in midair, and their commanders looked to their screens, confused. The soldiers on the surface paused, looking to the skies, unsure of what to expect next. The Xoreth fleet commander, a towering figure in black armor, stepped forward on his bridge, his golden eyes scanning the radar screens. He looked out into space and saw it, a movement, unlike anything he had expected. A single ship, small in comparison to the Xoreth warships, was approaching fast. The commander's eyes narrowed. His fleet was built to dominate, to overwhelm. No ship, no force, could challenge their might. But there was something about this unknown vessel that made him uneasy. It wasn't the size of the ship that troubled him. It was the suddenness with which it appeared. And then came the voice. A clear, powerful message crackled through the empty space, breaking the silence. "Humanity has heard your call." The Xoreth fleet commander froze. He replayed the message in his mind. Humanity. He had heard of Earth, the backwater planet in a far corner of the galaxy, but they were weak, primitive, barely able to defend themselves. How could this human fleet possibly stand against the might of the Xoreth? The idea seemed laughable. The crew on the Xoreth flagship exchanged uncertain glances. The commander barked orders, trying to make sense of the situation. Was this some sort of trap? He had no answer. But deep down, a gnawing feeling settled in his gut, a sense that something bigger was at play. No one was prepared for what came next. The approaching human ship appeared larger and more advanced than the Xoreth had anticipated. It wasn't just one ship, it was a fleet. A massive fleet, one that seemed to stretch across the stars, its ships gleaming with a power unknown to the Xoreth. This wasn't a group of desperate survivors. This was something different. The Xoreth suddenly realized they had underestimated humanity. On board the approaching fleet, Admiral Nathan Voss stood on the command deck of the flagship, the UNS Valkyrie. He had received the distress call from Vornis 9, and against all odds, the human fleet had answered. It wasn't just a rescue mission. It was a statement. Humanity wasn't going to back down, not this time. "Prepare to engage," Voss ordered, his voice cold and commanding. He had no intention of letting the Xoreth destroy another world, not while he was in command. As the fleet powered up its weapons, the Xoreth fleet still hovered in confusion. They had never encountered anything like this before. The human ships were unlike anything they had seen. The Valkyrie alone was a masterpiece of human engineering, equipped with technology that rivaled the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. The Xoreth had never been in a situation where they were the ones who didn't know what to expect. Humanity had arrived, and they were not going to let the Xoreth take another world. The battle was about to begin. The hum of the engines on the UNS Valkyrie vibrated through the massive ship, a steady pulse that matched the pounding of Admiral Nathan Voss's heart. He stood at the command bridge, his eyes fixed on the holographic map in front of him. His fleet was now entering the atmosphere of Vornis 9, a world on the edge of extinction. The Xoreth Dominion had already shattered the planet's defenses, and the last surviving citizens were hiding in the underground bunkers, waiting for death. But they weren't alone anymore. "Ready all weapons," Voss ordered, his voice cutting through the tension in the air. His crew moved swiftly, each individual carrying out their tasks with practiced precision. The sheer size of the fleet was intimidating. There were dozens of ships, all bristling with advanced weaponry. The Valkyrie itself was a marvel of human engineering, a dreadnought capable of taking on entire fleets alone. But this wasn't a one-ship operation. This was humanity's answer to the Xoreth Dominion. Commander Jalen Torres, still among the last survivors of Vornis 9, stood with his eyes fixed on the monitors in the underground shelter. The faintest flicker of hope had appeared when the human fleet arrived. But now, that hope was tinged with fear. Would humanity really be able to stop the Xoreth? He had no idea what kind of force was coming to their rescue, but he knew one thing for sure. The Xoreth were powerful. They had destroyed everything so far. The ground trembled as the battle in orbit escalated. The first wave of human ships opened fire, their weapons lighting up the dark sky like stars going supernova. The Xoreth fleet, still caught off guard by the sudden appearance of such a massive force, hesitated for a moment. But then, their commanders snapped into action, issuing orders and returning fire with deadly precision. The space above Vornis 9 erupted into a chaotic storm of laser beams, explosions, and the shrill shriek of destroyed ships. The Xoreth ships, though formidable, were not prepared for the devastating firepower of the human fleet. Their weapons, powerful though they were, lacked the sheer versatility and deadly precision that the humans had. It wasn't just their firepower that was surprising. The humans were coordinated, methodical, and relentless. Every attack was calculated, and every move seemed to have a purpose. The Valkyrie led the charge, its massive guns tearing through the enemy ships with brutal efficiency. From the Xoreth flagship, the Xoreth fleet commander stared in disbelief. The humans had arrived with a force that exceeded anything he had imagined. Their ships moved with unnatural precision, dodging incoming fire and delivering strikes that tore through his fleet. The Xoreth had always been the predators of the galaxy, feared by all who crossed their path. But now, they were the ones on the defensive. "This can't be happening," the fleet commander muttered under his breath, gripping the armrests of his chair. He had expected the humans to be weak, their ships primitive, their tactics easy to predict. But these humans, they were a different breed entirely. "Shields at 60%. His tactical officer shouted. "The humans are using some kind of advanced energy-based weaponry. Our defenses are barely holding." The fleet commander barked orders to his subordinates, but he could feel the panic rising in his chest. The humans weren't fighting like any enemies they had faced before. They weren't afraid, they weren't retreating. They were fighting with everything they had, and it was starting to show. The Xoreth fleet was being torn apart. On the surface of Vornis 9, the survivors watched in awe as the sky lit up with explosions. They had no idea what was happening above them, but they could feel the ground shake with the force of the battle. For the first time in days, they allowed themselves to hope. In the command center beneath the planet's surface, Commander Jalen Torres had a moment of hesitation. He had been preparing for the end. He had prepared himself to die in the rubble, but now he wasn't sure. The sound of the battle above filled his ears, and for the first time, he didn't feel the crushing weight of doom. There was a chance, a real chance. "Sir," one of his officers spoke urgently. "We've received an encrypted transmission. It's from the humans." Torres's heart skipped a beat. A communication from the fleet. It was impossible. No one was supposed to be able to break through the Xoreth jamming systems. Yet, here it was. "Play it," he said quickly, almost afraid to hope. The transmission crackled to life. A deep, commanding voice filled the room. "This is Admiral Nathan Voss of the United Earth Fleet. We are here to liberate Vornis 9. We are not leaving. Stand firm." Torres felt his chest tighten with emotion. The humans had not only heard their call, they had come. The cavalry had arrived, and they weren't backing down. Above, the battle raged on. The human fleet, still pouring fire into the Xoreth ships, showed no signs of slowing down. The Xoreth, on the other hand, were starting to falter. Their ships were taking critical damage, their tactical coordination falling apart as the chaos of battle overwhelmed them. The fleet commander watched his forces crumble. He had not expected such a fight. The Xoreth had never faced an enemy that fought with such determination, with such coordination. The humans weren't simply defending. They were taking the fight to the heart of the Xoreth fleet, pressing them into a corner. "Fall back," the fleet commander growled, but it was too late. The human ships were already on top of them. The Xoreth were surrounded. Back on the Valkyrie, Admiral Voss's eyes flicked over the screens. The battle was far from over, but he could feel it. Victory was within their grasp. The Xoreth, despite their superior numbers, were no match for the humanity's finest. They had underestimated humanity once. Now, they would regret it. "Prepare to board," Voss ordered coldly. "It's time to finish this." Humanity wasn't just here to stop the invasion. They were here to send a message. The Xoreth had underestimated Earth, and now they would see the full force of humanity's resolve. "You said." As the human ships continued their assault, the UNS Valkyrie made its move, closing in on the Xoreth flagship. Below, the crew of the Valkyrie was already preparing for the final push. The boarding teams, equipped with advanced weaponry and high-tech gear, were ready to storm the enemy vessel and strike at the heart of the Xoreth war machine. On the Xoreth flagship, the fleet commander's frustration grew. His forces were crumbling, his ships were falling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The humans were relentless. They had come from nowhere, and now they were at his doorstep. "Reinforce the shields," he barked. "We can't let them board. We can't let them reach the generator." But it was too late. The Valkyrie was too close, and the human assault was already underway. "All hands, brace for impact." Voss's voice echoed over the intercom as the boarding pods rocketed toward the flagship's hull. The massive Xoreth ship shuddered as explosions erupted along its surface. The human assault teams had breached their defenses. The battle for the Xoreth flagship had begun. The boarding pods slammed into the hull of the Xoreth flagship with a deafening crash, sending violent shockwaves through the ship. Inside the UNS Valkyrie, Admiral Nathan Voss watched the impact on his screen, his eyes fixed with determination. This was it, the final push that would either seal the fate of Vornis 9 or bring it to the edge of extinction. "All boarding teams, move out," Voss ordered through the comms. "We're taking this ship. No mercy." A wave of soldiers, clad in advanced exoskeletons and armed with heavy plasma rifles, filed into the pods, ready for what they knew would be the toughest fight of their lives. Among them was Captain Aria Klein, a veteran of many battles, whose heart beat with unwavering resolve. Her team was the first to break through the Xoreth's outer hull, emerging into the cold, metallic corridors of the flagship. "Stay sharp," Aria commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. "These guys are vicious, and they'll fight to the last. Move fast, and keep your heads on a swivel." Her team moved swiftly, using advanced motion detectors to track the enemy's movements through the ship's narrow, twisting passages. The Xoreth, with their reptilian features and cold, calculating minds, had already begun their counterattack. The sound of alien weapons firing echoed in the hallway, and the first Xoreth soldiers emerged from the shadows, their armor gleaming with deadly intent. Without hesitation, Aria and her team unleashed a volley of fire, cutting down the attackers before they could even make a move. But there were more. Dozens of Xoreth warriors poured into the corridor, their eerie green eyes glowing in the dim light. They moved with terrifying speed and ferocity, charging at the humans with weapons crackling with energy. Aria's team held their ground, their weapons firing in perfect unison, each shot finding its target. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and burnt metal, the sound of weapons and explosions reverberating through the halls of the alien ship. Aria ducked behind a pillar as another wave of Xoreth soldiers advanced. She could feel the heat of the plasma blasts as they tore through the air around her, narrowly missing. "We need to reach the core," Aria shouted to her team. "Push forward. Move." They fought their way through the ship, inch by inch. Each corner turned, revealing more resistance. The Xoreth were entrenched, their bodies moving like shadows in the darkness of the ship's inner sanctum. But with every step forward, the humans grew more relentless, their fire more precise. The momentum of the Valkyrie fleet had shifted, and now the tide was turning in their favor. Meanwhile, back on the bridge of the Valkyrie, Admiral Voss surveyed the battle from his command chair. His eyes flicked over the status reports flashing across his display. The enemy fleet was in disarray. The Xoreth ships had broken formation, scattered by the sheer force of the human assault. The flagship, however, was still heavily defended, and it would take everything they had to breach its core. Give the boarding teams full access to the flagship's communications, Voss ordered. We need to make sure the Xoreth know this is over. With a simple gesture, Voss connected the Valkyrie's command network to the enemy vessel's comm system. He knew the Xoreth fleet commander would be watching. The moment the transmission came through, it was clear. The Valkyrie was in charge now. The stars above Vornis 9 had never looked more beautiful. They twinkled brightly, casting a soft, almost peaceful glow over the surface of the planet. Yet, beneath that serene facade, the battle for the colony had only just begun. Though the Xoreth Dominion had suffered a crushing defeat, their retreat was far from the end of the war. The UNS Valkyrie and its fleet had done the impossible, but the galaxy now held its breath. The Xoreth had been humiliated, and in their anger, they would come back stronger. The victory was a fleeting moment, and the war was far from over. On the UNS Valkyrie, Admiral Nathan Voss stood at the bridge, staring out into the deep void of space. His mind raced. They had won a monumental battle, but in the back of his mind, he couldn't shake the feeling that they had only just begun to scratch the surface of the Xoreth threat. The fleet commander had sent a final message before retreating, one that sent a chill down Voss's spine. "They will come back," Voss muttered to himself, his voice barely audible over the hum of the command center. "They always do." He turned to his communications officer, Lieutenant Mira Daniels, a young but brilliant officer who had risen through the ranks quickly. "Lieutenant, send out a message to the fleet. Let them know we've won, but the war is not over. Prepare for the next phase. We need to be ready for whatever the Xoreth throw at us." "Yes, Admiral," Mira replied, typing furiously at her console. The fleet's morale had been boosted by their victory, but this next phase would test them all. On the surface of Vornis 9, Commander Jalen Torres and his team stood among the ruins of the colony's capital city. The explosions from the flagship's destruction still echoed in the distance, the ground trembling beneath their feet as shockwaves spread across the landscape. The Xoreth were gone for now, but the damage they had caused was devastating. "We saved the colony," Torres said, his voice steady but filled with a quiet sense of relief. "But we got a long road ahead. The Xoreth will regroup, and they will return stronger than before." "Do you think they'll be back soon?" asked Sergeant Liam Ortiz, his face grim as he surveyed the destruction. Torres nodded. "We can't afford to take chances. We'll have to make sure the colony is fortified. And we need to prepare for whatever comes next. Our victory here was just the beginning. We need to be ready for the next fight." Across the vast expanse of space, the Xoreth Dominion were not idle. Their fleet, though scattered and shattered, was still intact. They had retreated into the dark corners of the galaxy to regroup, lick their wounds, and plot their next move. General Trelgar, their ruthless leader, was not one to be defeated so easily. In his darkened command center aboard his flagship, General Trelgar stood before a holographic display of the galaxy. His cold eyes burned with fury as he studied the map of human-controlled territories. "They think they've won," Trelgar growled, his voice low and full of venom. "The humans will pay for this humiliation. They are no match for us. We will wipe them from existence." His second-in-command, Admiral Vrax, a hulking figure with reptilian skin, stepped forward. "General, our fleet was devastated in the battle for Vornis 9. The humans have proven more resilient than we anticipated, but if we regroup and strike with all our might, we will crush them." Trelgar's claws clenched in fury as he glared at Vrax. "Yes, but we will need more than just brute force. The humans have something we underestimated: their unity, their determination. They fight not for conquest, but for survival. It's time we use everything at our disposal. We'll strike where they least expect it." Vrax nodded, understanding the weight of Trelgar's words. "Then we will gather every ship we can. The Xoreth Dominion will not be defeated by a few humans." Trelgar turned away from the holographic display, his mind working furiously. "Prepare the fleet. We will need more than just ships. We'll need to strike at their heart. A surprise attack, something that will cripple their will to fight. Back on Vornis 9, life began to return to some semblance of normalcy. The humans had established a makeshift command center within the remains of the city. Their first priority was to rebuild, to heal the wounded, and to ensure the colony could survive another attack. But as the days passed, the fear of an imminent Torith retaliation began to weigh heavily on everyone's minds. Arya Klein, now with a weary but resolute expression, stood with Tors in the heart of the city's ruined plaza. "We've done everything we can for now," she said, her voice firm but tired. "But we know they'll come again. The question is, are we ready?" Tors looked out over the destruction, the weight of their survival pressing down on him. "We'll be ready, but I don't think we can afford to wait for them to strike first. We need to take the fight to them. We'll need more ships, more troops, and a strategy that gives us an edge," Arya replied. "But we can do it. I've seen what humanity is capable of. We won't back down." And so, while the survivors of Vornis 9 rebuilt and regrouped, Admiral Voss on the Valkyrie began to prepare for the next phase of the conflict. The Xoreth might have thought that they had the upper hand, but humanity had just begun to show its strength. The galaxy would soon learn that when humans are pushed to the edge, they don't retreat, they rise. The war for the future of Vornis 9 and the galaxy had only just begun, and the Xoreth had made a deadly mistake underestimating humanity's resolve. As the humans worked tirelessly to rebuild what had been lost on Vornis 9, a sense of urgency pervaded the air. While there was a fragile sense of relief, deep within their hearts, everyone knew that this was only the calm before the storm. The Xoreth Dominion had retreated, but the whispers of their return were already echoing through the ranks. Admiral Nathan Voss stood at the command center aboard the U.S. Valkyrie, his eyes scanning the data feeds. His fingers hovered above the console, contemplating the message that Xoreth had left behind in their wake. This is not over. Voss knew that the Xoreth would not stay down for long. Lieutenant Mira Daniels, her face a mask of concentration, worked beside him. The situation was dire. The Valkyrie had sustained significant damage during the battle, and even though the repairs were progressing, it would take weeks to fully restore its battle readiness. But Voss wasn't willing to wait for weeks. The Xoreth didn't give their enemies that kind of time. "Admiral," Mira spoke, pulling his attention back to the present, "we've detected movement at the edge of the system. Several large ships, possibly Xoreth recon forces. Should we engage?" Voss studied the coordinates for a moment. The Xoreth were sneaky, and a recon force could easily be a precursor to something far more sinister. The last thing they needed was to be caught off guard again. "Stay on alert, Lieutenant," Voss said, his voice steady, though his mind was racing. "Don't engage unless we're sure they're hostile. We need every advantage we can get." On the surface of Vornis 9, Commander Jalen Torres and his team were preparing for a potential counterstrike. The colony had received reinforcements, and the once ruined city was slowly being turned into a fortress. The survivors worked alongside engineers to fortify the defenses, set up turrets, and ensure the communication systems were operational. Torres walked along the perimeter of the newly constructed barricades, his mind heavy with the knowledge that the peace they'd fought for was fragile. The colony wasn't just a target for the Xoreth, it was a symbol of humanity's refusal to bend, even in the face of annihilation. "You really think they'll come for us again?" Sergeant Liam Ortiz asked, his voice low as he followed Torres. His face was bruised from the last fight, but there was a fire in his eyes. Despite everything they had endured, he wasn't ready to give up. "I don't think they'll come for us," Torres replied, his tone grim. "I know they will. The Xoreth will want revenge, and they won't be content with just retaking Vornis 9. They'll want to crush us completely. We're not just going to sit here and wait for them to do that, right?" Ortiz asked, his hand tightening around the grip of his rifle. "No," Torres said firmly. "We'll be ready, but we're not going to just survive. We're going to fight back." It's time we show the Xoreth that we're not a species to be trifled with. Back on the Valkyrie, Admiral Voss was pacing the bridge. He had received reports from all over the galaxy. The Xoreth Dominion was indeed mobilizing for war. Their fleets were reforming, and they were preparing for a large-scale assault on human-held colonies. The reports were fragmented and unclear, but Voss could feel the tension in the air. The Xoreth were coming, and they were bringing everything they had. Admiral, Mira's voice broke through his thoughts again. We've intercepted a message from the Xoreth flagship. It's a direct challenge. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the cold, reptilian face of General Trelgar. To the humans who think they have won, Trelgar's voice echoed through the room, his tone dripping with malice. You may have defeated us once, but you have only sealed your fate. Your victory was an illusion. We are coming for you. Prepare for your extinction. The transmission cut off abruptly, but the message was clear. The Xoreth weren't just coming to fight. They were coming to end humanity's story, to wipe them from the galaxy once and for all. Damn it, Voss muttered under his breath, slamming his fist into the console. We knew they wouldn't give up, but this is. Mira, ever calm and composed, spoke up. Admiral, we've gathered all available data. If the Xoreth are really planning a full-scale invasion, they'll come through the Brenna Rift. It's the only route left unprotected. If we can intercept them before they get there. Voss didn't need her to finish. He knew exactly what had to be done. We're going to hit them first. We're going to catch them in the rift before they can bring their full force to bear, he said decisively. Set course for the rift, Lieutenant. All hands to battle stations. The Valkyrie shuddered as its engines roared to life. It was time to take the fight to the Xoreth. Meanwhile, back on the surface of Vornis 9, Commander Taurus and his team prepared for the inevitable. The Xoreth had made their threat, and there was no backing down now. Taurus had sent word to the other human-held colonies, calling for reinforcements. The time for hiding was over. It was time to fight. The Xoreth had underestimated humanity before, and they would do so again at their peril. But this time, humanity was ready. Taurus turned to his team, his eyes fierce with determination. When the Xoreth arrive, we hit them hard. We will show them that humanity is not to be trifled with. This is our home now, and we fight for it. As the preparations continued, the final stages of humanity's greatest battle began to unfold. The Valkyrie was moving into position, and the fleets of the Xoreth were gathering in the rift. Soon, the final confrontation would begin. Would humanity stand its ground, or would the Xoreth crush them beneath their claws? The next chapter of the war was about to begin, and no one, on either side, was prepared for what was coming next. The time had come. The entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath as the UNS Valkyrie sailed toward the Brenna Rift, the massive expanse of space that lay between the human colonies and the heart of the Xoreth Dominion. The rift was known for its dangerous gravitational anomalies and its chaotic, unpredictable space-time distortions. It was a place where even the most skilled pilots feared to venture. But now, the humans had no choice. If they were to stop the Xoreth from destroying everything they held dear, this was the only place to strike. Admiral Voss stood at the command center, his hands clasped behind his back, eyes locked on the tactical screen. The Valkyrie had been reinforced with every available ship from the fleet, but even then it felt like a meager force compared to the vast, monstrous armada the Xoreth were assembling. Report, Lieutenant Daniels, Voss commanded, his voice steady, despite the storm of thoughts swirling in his mind. The Xoreth are on the move, Lieutenant Daniels replied, her fingers flying across the console. They're coming through the rift. A full assault. We've calculated their trajectory, and it's clear. They're aiming directly for Vornis 9. They want to crush the heart of humanity's resistance. Voss clenched his jaw. He had hoped, for just a moment, that the Xoreth might retreat, but he knew that was never going to happen. They were too proud, too determined to annihilate humanity once and for all. "Prepare to intercept them. All ships," Voss ordered. "We'll cut them off before they reach the colony. Lieutenant Daniels, take us into the rift." The Valkyrie shuddered as the engines roared to life, pushing the ship toward the tumultuous rift. The view screen outside showed swirling, distorted space. The rift was a maze of gravitational anomalies, with asteroid fields, black holes, and time-dilating pockets scattered throughout. Few ships had ever attempted to navigate through the rift, and fewer still had made it out alive. But the humans had no choice. This was their only shot at stopping the Xoreth. Meanwhile, on the surface of Vornis 9, Commander Torres and his team stood at the ready, waiting for the inevitable. The Xoreth might have been moments away from arriving, but humanity would not go down without a fight. Every corner of the colony had been fortified, every defensive system activated. All that was left was to wait, to hold the line. Torres stood before his troops, his expression grim but resolute. "We know what's coming. The Xoreth will come for us with everything they've got. But we're not just going to sit here and wait for them to wipe us out. We fight, and we fight hard." The soldiers around him nodded in agreement, their faces set in determination. They had all seen the devastation the Xoreth could bring, but they also knew one thing: humanity had the strength to resist. Back on the Valkyrie, Admiral Voss' voice rang out once again. "All ships, prepare for battle. We've only got one chance to stop them, and we can't afford to fail." The ship began to shake as it entered the rift, and for a moment, it felt as though the fabric of reality itself was bending around them. Lights flickered, and the ship groaned under the stress. But the crew held their focus. "Steady, everyone," Voss said, his voice calm but firm. "This is it." Suddenly, the tactical screens lit up with a burst of activity. The Xoreth fleet had emerged from the rift. Their ships were massive, heavily armored, and armed with weapons capable of obliterating entire planets. It was a sight that would have struck fear into the hearts of most, except the humans. They had fought before, and they would fight again. The Valkyrie and its fleet moved into position, surrounding the Xoreth ships as they attempted to take up battle formations. A battle unlike any other was about to begin. But this time, the humans would be the ones on the offensive. "Fire at will," Voss commanded. The first volley of energy blasts erupted from the human ships, striking the Xoreth vessels. The explosions illuminated the dark expanse of space like fireflies in the night. But the Xoreth weren't easily defeated. They retaliated with devastating force, launching their own barrage of plasma missiles, and within moments, the battle became a full-scale war. Admiral Voss watched as the Valkyrie returned fire, its cannons lighting up the void with each shot. He could feel the heat of the battle intensifying, the pressure mounting as his fleet fought with everything they had. Meanwhile, on the surface of Vornis 9, Commander Torres and his team fought desperately to keep the Xoreth at bay. The enemy's forces were overwhelming, but humanity refused to break. Torres led the charge, coordinating with the Valkyrie's fleet to help direct airstrikes and reinforcements. They weren't alone. Humanity's united front was more than just soldiers. It was a collective force that would not back down. With each passing minute, the Xoreth fleet began to falter. Their once imposing might was being chipped away by the sheer force of humanity's resolve. The Valkyrie, battered but unyielding, continued to strike, and the Xoreth, caught in a pincer maneuver, were forced to retreat back into the rift. Admiral Voss allowed himself a small moment of relief, but it was fleeting. The Xoreth were not done yet. They had retreated, yes, but this war was far from over. "I'll give them this," Voss muttered, watching the Xoreth ships disappear into the rift. "They fight until the very end." The battle had ended for now, but the humans knew one thing: this was just the beginning. The Xoreth would come again, and humanity would be ready. They had survived, against all odds, and had struck a blow for freedom. In the end, the galaxy had learned a powerful lesson. When humanity is backed into a corner, When it seems that all hope is lost, there is one truth. Humanity will always fight, always rise, and never give up. The fight for the future had just begun.